All right, today we're diving into an ancient herb that's getting a ton of modern attention, Rhodiola Rosea. We're going to break down the real science behind its biggest claims, and we're also going to cover some critical warnings you really need to hear. Let's get right into it.
So, does this sound familiar? You know that feeling of being totally mentally and physically drained, where stress isn't just a now and then thing, but it feels like your constant companion? It's a super common story in our crazy, fast-paced world, and it's exactly what leads so many people to look for an edge.
And that search often leads to places you might not expect, like the super cold, high-altitude mountains of Europe and Asia. For centuries, people there have been using this one particular root, one that modern science is only now really starting to understand. And that root is called Rhodiola Rosea. You might also hear it called Arctic root or golden root. Its power, at least according to tradition and now some emerging science, comes from it being a very, very special type of substance.
This brings us to a really core concept, adaptogen. So what the heck is that? Well, think of it like a thermostat for your body's stress response. Instead of just trying to eliminate stress, which is impossible, an adaptogen is believed to help your body handle it more effectively, kind of boosting your resilience without targeting just one specific thing. It's a pretty fascinating idea, right?
So yeah, this is not some new age trend that just popped up. It has a super long history, especially in places like Russia and Scandinavia, where it was the go-to for things like anxiety and fatigue. The root itself is incredibly complex. It's got over 140 active ingredients, but science has really zeroed in on two compounds as the heavy lifters, rosavin and salidroside. If you're going to remember any names, those are the two.
Okay, so let's get to the most compelling part of this story, the areas where we have strong, solid evidence from human studies. This is where rhodiola really seems to shine, especially when you're talking about those super common modern problems, stress and fatigue.
This study just illustrates the potential perfectly. They took 118 people who were suffering from what they called stress-related burnout and gave them 400 milligrams of rhodiola every day. The results were pretty striking. They saw clear improvements in both stress and depression, but, and here's the kicker, most of that improvement happened within the very first week, and it kept going for the full 12 weeks. That's a really fast response.
And you see a really similar story when you look at fatigue. In another study, 100 people dealing with chronic fatigue symptoms took the same dose. And again, after just 1 week, they were reporting big improvements across the board. We're talking less fatigue, better mood, sharper concentration, and just a better overall quality of life. It really suggests a broad spectrum effect on that whole experience of being just worn down.
So the big question is, how does it stack up against conventional treatments? Well, a 2015 study put rhodiola head-to-head with the common antidepressant sertraline, which you probably know is Zoloft. And the results were really nuanced. The sertraline was, overall, more effective at reducing depression symptoms, no question. However, the people taking rhodiola reported way fewer side effects, and they just found it easier to tolerate. So it presents this really interesting trade-off between raw potency and side effects.
Okay, let's totally shift gears. Beyond stress and fatigue, there are some other potential benefits being looked at, but, and this is a big but, we need a huge dose of caution here. We are now officially entering the territory of promising but very, very early research, where the evidence is just not established in humans yet.
And this quote is key. Researchers themselves are basically hitting the brakes, saying, hey, we need a lot more work to connect what we're seeing in the lab with what might actually happen in a person. This is our big reminder to separate what's a proven fact from what's just an exciting possibility for now.
So with that disclaimer in mind, here's what the early stuff suggests. In animal studies, rhodiola has shown it might improve learning and memory. In studies on rats, it looked like it could help protect against diabetes. And in test tubes, what we call in vitro studies, that key compound salidroside has been shown to slow down the growth of certain cancer cells. Again, really fascinating leads, but a very long way from being proven human benefits.
Now let's pivot to a bit of a reality check, because we've talked about the good and the promising, but there are also mixed results out there, and, very importantly, some pretty serious cautions to consider whenever we're talking about supplements.
Take exercise performance, for example. You hear the claims, but the actual data is kind of all over the map. Some studies did find positive effects, like a faster reaction time or just making the workout feel easier. But then other studies found zero impact on key things like oxygen uptake or muscle performance. So it's a real mixed bag.
And here is a number you absolutely need to see. 6. As of 2024, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, had sent out 6 warning letters to companies making rhodiola supplements.
So why?
Well, those warnings really highlight the wild west of the supplement industry. There's a real risk of something called adulteration, which basically just means the product you buy might not have the quality or the potency that it claims on the bottle. And it's so crucial to remember the FDA regulates supplements as food, not as drugs. That means companies cannot claim their product cures or treats any disease. And of course, like with anything, there's always potential for side effects, drug interactions, and we have zero data on its safety for children or for women who are pregnant.
So, if after all that you decide you still want to explore this, how do you do it safely? Well, first, look for a USP or an NSF seal on the bottle. These are third-party groups that actually verify quality. Second, check the label for that specific ratio we mentioned, 3% rosavins and 1% salidrosides. That's what mimics the natural stuff. Third, it's usually taken on an empty stomach, but it can be a little stimulating, so definitely don't take it right before bed. But the most important step, the one you absolutely positively cannot skip, is talking to your doctor before you start. Seriously.
So, after going through the history, the science, and all those warnings, what's the final takeaway here? What does this all really mean for you?
It pretty much boils down to this. The evidence for rhodiola as a tool to fight stress-related burnout and fatigue is actually pretty compelling. It's backed by good human trials. However, most of its other cool potential benefits are still in those early, unproven stages. And then, layered on top of everything, are very real concerns about supplement quality, purity, and safety in a market that's just not very well regulated.
Which kind of leaves us with a final question to think about. When you take this mix of ancient tradition, some solid modern science for very specific uses, and then these equally solid modern warnings, is Rhodiola Rosea a powerful tool for building resilience in our stressful world, or is it maybe more of a reminder that, even with natural remedies, being cautious and doing your homework are your most important assets? That's something to mull over.